The forest woke like a giant animal, slow, deliberate, full of ancient memory. Sunlight sifted through the canopy in pale ribbons, catching on dust and pollen and the invisible lives of tiny insects dancing in the beams. Vines hung like ropes from high branches. Ferns curled open like held breaths. Far off, a hornbill barked loud as a slammed door, and then the forest sank back into its layered hush. The gorilla family moved as one, a drifting constellation of dark bodies over green. At their center was the silverback, enormous, scarred, steady as a hill. His spine bore the streak of weathered silver that flashed when the light caught it, and his chest, barrel-wide, a drum, rose and fell with slow patience. He was a presence as much as he was an animal. Everything near him seemed to calm. Even the younger males, rowdy as rain, checked themselves when he shifted or breathed. The mother carried her baby on her belly, the little one's fingers curled in her fur, like stars snagged in branches. The baby was just old enough to demand the world with both hands. He would twist his neck to peer at everything, the mauve bruise of ripening figs, the pale faces of fungi, the slow parade of ants hauling their leaf-cut banners along a log, and then squeal, which always made his mother smile with her eyes. He was small, still clumsy, but already full of the kind of bravery only innocence gives. He believed there would always be a hand to catch him, that the dark of the leaves held no teeth. The silverback, call him Baraka, smelled the air the way a reader reads a page. He leaned forward, nostrils widening, registering the ordinary. Crushed chlorophyll, damp humus, his family's skin, the rank but familiar musk of forest pigs far off, the faint pepper of chimpanzees. He rumbled low, a reassurance, a laying down of calm. The others fed, babies squeaked. Adolescents snapped vines and practiced looking fierce. Far, far above them, draped over a branch that could have been a tiger-striped river, lay a leopard. It was all tendon and patience. Spots broke its outline into forest. Its tail dangled lazy, a pendulum measuring hunger. It had not eaten in 2 days. Hunger turns seconds into stones. The leopard had tracked this troop since dawn, mapping their movements, marking which adults were vigilant, which were distracted by fruit, which juveniles chased each other out of the circle of safety. It had no illusions about the silverback. A gorilla male could break a limb with a blow. Even a wrong bite could mean the end. But it also knew what every predator learns by failing. Chances do not return on command. They must be taken when the world blinks. The troop came to a stand of flowering herbs, where yellow blossoms lifted like lanterns between the roots. In the sifted light, the flowers looked like tiny moons. The baby reached, and this time the mother let him. He tottered 3 steps from her chest, then 5, knees bent, hands out in careful eagerness. And when he found himself planted in the middle of 100 yellow faces, he laughed. A soft, gurgling sound that scratched something joyful into the air. Baraka watched him. A single warning grunt, and the mother turned her head, fingertips resting on the ground, eyes on her child, but she didn't call him back. He was not far. The troop was ringed around him like a living wall. Safety felt as solid as bark. The leopard slid its forepaws forward, silent, like a shadow unhitching itself from noon. The world shrank to the space between its whiskers and the baby's small back. The baby took a bloom in both hands and crushed it, fascinated by the way it went from a stiff star to a smear of gold. He smelled his hands and sneezed, delighted. His head tipped back. He saw leaves and light and the shape of the branch above, but the cat was so much like light and leaves that his brain did not name it. Baraka's belly tightened. It was nothing but a thread of scent and a prickle along the skin of his shoulders, a pattern in the understory gone wrong, the feeling you get when a song loses its beat for just a breath. He rose half a hand higher, knuckles pressed to earth. His eyes swept the leaves, the trunks, the weft of vines above. Wind fingered his fur. An adolescent cracked a twig and laughed. The world looked the same, but the world was not the same. The leopard's pupils widened, the jaw loosened and tightened, the paws reshaped for flight. It was already choosing the path back up the lattice of bark, already following the map its body would run, once the teeth closed around a trembling spine. Predators imagine completion. It's how the body knows what to do. The baby flopped onto his butt with a surprised chirp and fell in love with his own foot. He brought it to his mouth with 2 hands, tried to taste it, forgot what he was doing, and patted the dirt. Somewhere behind him, the mother's breath quickened. Somewhere behind her, a juvenile squared up to another juvenile and made a show of pounding his chest so lightly it was comedy. An older female swatted him with the flat of her hand, and he laughed the way children laugh when they are told not to. Baraka took one slow step. A warning hum rolled in his chest, the kind of sound that tells a family, "Hold." The mother's head snapped back to her child. She rose. She did not yet run, but inside she had already sprinted the length between them a dozen times. Up on the branch, the leopard made a decision the way lightning chooses a tree. It moved. One heartbeat, the baby was a small black curl among flowers. The next heartbeat, the world tore. Leaves split, a branch snapped, the air shouted. A shape crashed from the green with its mouth already open, and the baby's scream was the sound of a bright thing breaking. The mother exploded forward, fingers digging earth. The adolescent who was playing brave was suddenly very small and nowhere. The old female shoved him behind her. Bodies thumped the ground and the ground answered. The forest startled, wings, clatter, a rain of bark. Baraka stood all the way, and the air around him seemed to step back. He looked not at the leopard, not at the glitter of its eyes or the thrashing blur of gold, but at the tiny body caught in the black tool of its mouth. The scream snapped into a sob, a ragged plea. In that sound, Baraka recognized the simple truth that underwrites every life. "This is mine." He launched. The leopard felt the earth slam and then heard a roar like a landslide given voice. It jerked, almost missed its mark, but its teeth found soft skin and shut. The infant lifted like a dropped fruit snatched mid-fall. Pain bloomed sharp in the baby's cry. The cat wheeled. The path it had planned, up, vanish, was no longer clean. The silverback was too close. The cat bolted sideways, low and fast, a shadow that knew the undersides of roots. The mother was there, and the leopard snatched at her with one paw. Flash, 4 knives enough to make her flinch, to make her stumble a fraction, to buy a single breath. That breath was a canyon, if you were fast enough inside it. Baraka hit the ground where the leopard had been half an instant before. Dirt jumped. His open mouth showed teeth cut for plants, but the muscles around them were cut for war. He would not think. There was no space for thought. There was only the narrow tunnel where his child had gone, and he entered it like thunder in a culvert. The forest swallowed them, the mother, bleeding but not breaking, the troop with their eyes wide and white, the old female herding the juveniles, the silverback flooding forward, and ahead of him, the leopard running as if the ground were something it had just now invented. The baby cried once, a thin blade of sound, and then the world turned to pursuit. The chase burned a groove through vines and ferns. Where the leopard skimmed, leaves eddied. Where Baraka ran, leaves slapped back hard as rain. The forest reshaped itself around urgency. Branches shoved aside, saplings bent and sprang, birds tore the air, and the leopard's body found every quiet seam. It knew which routes to ride, which gaps between lianas opened like doorways, which fallen trunk could be a bridge. So many lives live on, knowing the small architecture of green. Baraka did not know the small architecture. He knew force. He aimed it like a thrown stone. He heard, rather than saw, the mother stumble behind him. He did not look back. Trust is part of love. He trusted that her legs would discover new heat, that the old female would ring the others in a moving wall, that the adolescents, who were brave enough to pretend at noon, would know how to be afraid at the right time. He trusted that what needed to follow would follow, but what needed to be caught he would catch. The leopard cut left around a strangler fig that rose like a cathedral pillar. Baraka went through the lattice of its buttresses, shoulders scraping bark, a halo of ants detailing his fur and abandoning him just as quickly. The cat hit a slope and took it at a diagonal to keep speed. The infant's cry flared and dwindled. Pain builds silence the way wind builds waves. It comes back around. A log lifted the cat to a low branch, and a low branch became a ladder. It would go up. Gravity is an ally if you can reverse it. The canopy was an old secret the leopard had never bothered to share with anyone but its own hunger. Baraka struck the trunk with both hands. Sound went up like a flare. The leopard clutched with all claws, hind feet sawing bark, teeth still tight. The branch quivered, leaves shook like hands. The cat shot to the next branch. The infant dangled in a curve of jaw and tail, tiny fingers opening and closing, searching the air for an anchor that kept changing shape. Baraka climbed. The tree winced. He moved as if the trunk were an enemy. He did not climb like a chimp, no quick thews, no upper body ricochet. He climbed like a planet shifting hemispheres. The bark groaned. A thin runnel of the cat's fear turned to liquid and ran down the inside of its chest. It had miscalculated the giant's speed. Hunger had scribbled over caution's map. Below, the mother pressed both hands to her wound and then took them away. Blood made crescents on her skin. She kept moving, kept her eyes on the higher dark shape of her mate, on the paler shape of her child. She murmured, a sound part prayer, part rage, that travelled up the wood in tremors. When Baraka reached the first broad limb, he paused only long enough to breathe twice. The leopard crouched 15 feet above him, hindquarters quivering, tail lashing, pupils blown to black. It set the baby against the branch for a heartbeat to adjust its hold, forepaw pinning the small chest. And in that heartbeat, the infant made a sound so soft Baraka could feel it more than hear it. It was not a scream. It was a question. His heart answered with something that wasn't sound at all, and yet it shook the tree. He moved again. The leopard didn't wait. It sprang sideways into a mess of intertwined creepers that made a net. The net bowed. The cat used the bow like a catapult, spitting itself to a sister branch that thrust out from the trunk like a spear. The infant swung. The little hands opened. The world rotated around terrified eyes. Baraka lunged up the main trunk. His palm struck a fungus and sent spores into the air like smoke. He breathed them like dust. Another branch, then another. He was under the cat now. He could smell it. Hot, wild, lion-sweet with a bitter rind. He could smell his son. The leopard hissed, one of those sounds that changes the shape of a fight, and struck. It struck not at Baraka's face, but at his reach. Claws raked the back of his hand. Pain seared bright as lightning. He did not withdraw. He changed angles. He climbed higher than sense advised, to a narrower spot where his weight shook the wood more. When he beat his chest there, the vibration spoke a language the leopard knew. This branch is becoming a lie. The cat flattened, balancing on flex and calculation. Balance is a cat's religion. It calculated how much it could afford to stand, how much to bend, how much to fight. The sum kept coming wrong. It was very hard to do math when something bigger than fear was moving straight through the center of you. Baraka reached the level of the cat and stopped. The branch between them was a green bridge lined with tiny leaves like flags in an unkind wind. He rested one hand on the trunk and the other on the bridge. He looked at his child, and then at the cat, and then, only then, at the space under the branch, which was not space but the idea of falling made visible. The ground felt like another world. He stepped onto the bridge. The leopard's ears flattened to its skull. It moved a paw. Then the other, the way a dancer tests a stage that might not hold. It opened its mouth just a fraction. The baby slipped a fraction. The cat corrected. The silverback moved another step. The branch made a sound half whistle, half prayer. This is where the world usually chooses which life continues, but the forest is full of choices other than killing. Baraka did not charge. He did something no equation in the leopard's body had anticipated. He put his chest against the branch, laid his length along it, wrapped it in his arms as if he were a vine writ sudden. He lowered his head, and with his teeth he bit the bark, gentle, firm, unbreakable, and held. The branch stopped quivering. The green flags of leaves steadied. The leopard did not know what to call the feeling that moved through its body. It wasn't fear in the old ways. It was the logic of the chase collapsing, like ice under a foot in spring. It transferred the baby's weight to its forepaws for a second to adjust, and in that second, Baraka's free hand came across the branch with the precision of a trap. He did not grab the cat, he grabbed his child. His fingers closed over a tiny chest to which breath still clung, and he pulled. The leopard struck at him then with everything it had left, two forepaws scything, back legs braced, mouth working like a broken hinge. One claw parted Baraka's skin across the chest, a bright, merciless stroke. Another nicked his jaw. Pain sang. He opened his own mouth in a roar that was mostly air and fury, pinning the branch with his body and keeping his grip on the baby, who pressed into his arm, into that sound, as if it were a house. He pulled again. The cat lost the infant and found rage. It went forward. Baraka's other hand, torn, swelling, came up hard. He did not smack. He didn't try to break. He simply placed his palm, full and weighty, against the cat's face and pushed, not off the branch, not into emptiness, but back to the trunk, back to the truth that there was still room to leave. For a second, that felt longer than some summers. Nobody moved. The baby coughed once. A thin, wet sound. The leopard's breath rasped. Baraka's blood ticked from his chest onto leaves below. The cat blinked first. It backed. It drew its lips over its teeth. Hunger wrote itself smaller. Survival wrote itself larger. It took one whispering step, then another, and then it chose the nearest path that was not a fight. The canopy accepted it. It was gone the way a thought is gone when you wake. Baraka held very still. He felt the infant's chest with his thumb. Breath came, breath went. He turned, inch by inch, until his back was against the trunk. He slid down, his arms a cradle that had never been asked to be this strong, and was. When his feet found earth, the old female sobbed out loud. The mother rushed forward, her hands out and shaking, and then she stopped. She stopped because Baraka did not give the baby back right away. He pressed his forehead to that small head and stayed there, a long, quiet touch that said everything language is too clumsy to carry. Then he gave the child to his mother. She took him with a sound that vibrated leaves. She put him to her chest and swayed, the way mothers sway without knowing, the way trees sway in wind they cannot see. The baby nuzzled once, then rooted, then whimpered, then fell into a breathing that belonged to sleep as much as to shock. Baraka sat down because the ground had been waiting for him. He stared at nothing. Blood climbed down the ladder of his ribs. Pain arrived properly, unpacking. The adolescents, who had been stoned during the last minutes, suddenly remembered movement and made a clumsy circle around him, their eyes daring his wounds not to be real. The old female came and touched his arm with the back of her knuckles and then touched the ground, a blessing for both. Somewhere, leaves let go of their water and the first light rain began. Rain in the forest is not dramatic at first. It is a careful rehearsal, a drop, then a handful, then a soft patter. In the quiet after crisis, that sound, braided with the small sounds of the troop, the baby's sucking, the mother's hum, the adolescent's whispers, until the world felt like it had a heartbeat that belonged to more than one body. Baraka tipped his chin up and let the wet cool the track across his chest. Blood thinned and spread. He pulled a broad leaf toward him and pressed it there by habit, by the memory of 100 little remedies passed down in hands and huffs and small acts. The mother flashed him a look that was 1,000 looks, thanks and worry and fierce pride. They did not move for a long time. Sometimes continuing is not going forward. Sometimes it is just staying where you are until the ground says, "Okay, now." When they did rise, it was the old female who stood first and walked a tight ring around the group, making the boundary real again with her feet. The adolescents followed her lead, chests out, whisper growls stitched to their throats as if their voices could do what their bodies couldn't. The mother walked while holding the infant so close that he might have been part of her bone. She checked Baraka every few steps with her eyes. He returned the check with a small nod each time. It is hard for kings to say, "I am all right." The nod is one of the ways they learn. The troop fed near the edges of fruiting trees, never staying long. The world had a new bruise on it, and they stepped around it, even if no path showed. Baraka moved last, which was not how he preferred, but was how wisdom orders things after claws. He listened to the forest talk to itself about what had happened, how the rush of bodies had cleared a brief corridor, how the leopard's quick life had brushed the bark here, how birds still argued the particulars as if they were the first to know fear, and he let that talk work on him like medicine. Every few minutes, the baby stirred and made a small sound, whose shape meant safety to anyone who had ever been small. Baraka's jaw unclenched a fraction each time. He had heard many sounds in his life. The scream of a rival's charge, the crack of lightning on a tree, the thin last gasp of a tree frog in a snake's mouth. There was no sound he respected more than the quiet of his own child breathing. By late afternoon, clouds packed thickly over the canopy, and the rain came harder. Drops fattened and fell like thrown beads, clicking on leaves, pattering the soil. The troop found a shallow rise where water ran off rather than pooled, and they made their camp there. No tents, no walls, but a feeling of gatheredness nobody could mistake for anything else. Baraka lay half on his side. The mother settled a foot from him, her back to his front, the baby between them like a spark that needed all the oxygen two bodies could give. The adolescents clumped beyond, and the old female chose a rock with a view and a little dryness underneath, and pretended she was not standing watch. Everyone pretends, sometimes, to let the leader rest. Evening washed the green out of the leaves and painted the trunks a solemn black. The rain softened. Night people took the stage, their voices smaller, higher, stranger. Bats wrote letters no one would read. A civet sketched worry through the understory, and then decided not tonight. Somewhere, invisible, the leopard lay across a branch and licked rain from its whiskers. Hunger had not left. It never does. It had simply agreed, for now, to wait its turn. In the dark, Baraka did not sleep. He went back, as the body goes back even when the mind would rather not, through the running, through the tree, through the branch that had stopped shaking when he held it. He felt again the weight of the infant shift in his hand. In that memory-slowed time, he noticed something new, how the baby, even while being lifted into harm, had reached one hand toward him, a tiny arc through the air. A little bridge hung on nothing but belief. He had become the other end of that bridge. He let out a long breath that rattled a little. The mother's fingers walked back along the baby's fur and touched his arm. The touch startled the dark into feeling more like a room than a night. When dawn came, it came blue, heavy, unsure, and then, as if remembering, it came bright. Mist rose from everything that had been wet and now wished to be air. The troop woke in a gentle chain. The old female first, then the mother, then the adolescents, and the baby last, yawning a yawn so large it seemed like he was trying to swallow morning. The wounds on Baraka's chest had clotted. The lines would turn to scars, then to stories. He rose and moved the way old trees move in wind, slowly, with presence. The troop watched him not just for instruction, but for permission. He gave it with one small thump of his chest, the softest signal for "we go." They moved toward a valley where the fruit was fat in this season. The trail took them along a ridge where light came in from both sides. From up there, the forest looked like an ocean without waves, green forever. The baby watched it, the way he had watched the flower, sure that everything in the world existed to be touched. He reached toward a slab of sun and tried to grab it. Baraka wanted, for a moment so brief it was almost pain, to tell him the truth, that not everything can be held. Then he decided the better truth was this one: try anyway. They ate for hours, unhurried. The adolescents resumed their performances, which were larger now that they had seen what largeness was for. They made the sounds of roars, but left the meaning to someone else. The old female pinched them when they overreached. Laughter returned, first in thin threads, then in ropes. When the troop rested again, Baraka sat apart just enough that he could be seen from every angle. He scanned, not with panic now, but with the easy insistence of a mountain. His ears caught the small languages the forest spoke when it was calm, the ping of a beetle against a leaf, the consonant scrape of a lizard's belly on bark, the vowel-shaped wind made going through the same gap it had used yesterday. Calm is its own sound. The mother brought the baby to him. She set him down between Baraka's feet and waited. The little one scrambled up his father's shin like it was a low branch, tugged on the silver hair with unabashed ownership, and then, when he reached the ledge of Baraka's knee, he turned around and leaned back into the giant's belly, as if into a cliff warmed by sun. Baraka put one hand over him like a roof. The mother watched this and made a sound the world must have invented just to be used here. She touched Baraka's shoulder, careful of the wound, and then she left the two of them in that small architecture of safety. Time thinned. The baby's head wagged as he drifted between waking and sleep. Baraka watched 3 butterflies argue softly over a patch of light. He watched a termite wing detach and fall, turning like a tiny leaf. He watched the place where the leopard had not come. And in all that watching, his breath slowed until he realized he had not taken one that hurt in a little while. In the late heat, the forest made a sound like a sigh. Somewhere distant, a thunderhead stacked itself into a blue mountain with its own geography. Rain again, maybe. It would be fine. The world had already ended yesterday and then gone on, which is what the world does best. In the days that followed, the troop's path mismatched the cat's path just enough to keep peace. The leopard found a duiker, quick and wrong in the clearing at the wrong time, and hunger was quiet for a day. In the same days, the baby learned something new about edges. He did not stop walking to them, no living thing can, but he began to glance back a fraction sooner to find Baraka with his eyes. The look they exchanged was a kind of rope you could not see and could not break. Once, toward evening, the troop passed under the tree where the first flowers had opened like small suns. The baby wriggled to be put down. The mother, who remembered how a simple sun-shaped thing could suddenly be the shadow of a mouth, hesitated, then lowered him anyway, because faith also grows muscles when you use it. He waddled to the flowers and knelt. He did not crush them this time. He touched a petal with one finger and then looked up, not at the canopy where danger had worn the shape of leaves, but at Baraka. The silverback lifted his face and breathed in the thread of flower scent, and his mouth softened as if he were learning to smile without teeth. No roar moved the forest that evening. No sudden weight fell. The world famously refuses to promise what it will do next, but on that day it chose gratitude. Night came down without incident and with 1,000 small stars hidden behind the leaves. The troop nested. The old female picked a branch for herself that made her look like a note on a page. The adolescents settled in a tangle that would be hilarious at midnight. The mother held her baby belly to belly, swaying the way mothers sway when the world is asleep. And Baraka, scarred, steady, blood dried into a new line on the map of him, sat with his back to a trunk and listened to a silence that had less fear in it than yesterday's silence had. He closed his eyes, just for a moment, and saw the branch again, and felt the tug of that small body in his hands, the extraordinary lightness of something you could not bear to lose. He opened his eyes, and the leaves overhead made the slow wheel the sky makes when it cannot decide which star to give you first. In the distance, a leopard moved through the green the way a thought moves through a mind, indelible, necessary, unsentimental. It paused at the edge of a clearing and then turned away, its hunger redirected, its map redrawn. In the branch above the troop, a nightjar clicked twice and then went still. Baraka lifted one hand and, with the flat of his palm, touched the place on his chest where claw and love had both left marks. He felt the ridge, the heat under it, the memory that would harden to a story, the story that would harden to a teaching. He let his hand fall and rest lightly on the ground. The ground answered in its old way, sending him up the news that everything living sends everything else living. I am here. You are here. We are still here. And in that shared, unremarkable miracle, the forest slept.